when you put a conference on like this, Denise obviously puts everything together, but doesn't tell you exactly what to say. And I can prove this to you because some of the things I'm going to say echo exactly what other people have been saying today, and some are a bit different. And one of the reasons why you can see that things are a bit different is that, just like everybody else today, I've been talking about ESI's media. So if it had all been perfectly planned, we wouldn't be talking exclusively about the Evening Standard and Independent. But there we are. We've got some more ads for them coming along in a second. So what I wanted to talk about today is the idea about paying for attention. My name is Mike. I'm the Managing Director of Lumen. We're an eye tracking company, or attention technology company. And for the last 18 months or so, we've been partnering with AMIA, who are this logo you see there. They do Sainsbury's Nectar Card. And what I wanted to do is just talk to you about some of the things that we've been learning from the world's first eye tracking panel. For the last 18 months now, we've had a panel of around about 500 people dotted around the country, all equipped with laptop-mounted eye tracking cameras. You can see these things just there in the blue bar around it, a small camera that affixes to your laptop. This is great. It's amazingly accurate and really wonderful. The challenge with it, of course, is that you actually have to have a physical piece of equipment on people's cameras, and it doesn't work on mobile. So the good news on that is that we are now moving to a second stage of this, which uses people's webcams as an eye tracking device. And we've launched the desktop version of that, and in 2 months' time we hope to launch the mobile version of that, so we'll be able to supply you some data about mobile as well. But the panel is 500 strong. We track people's activity passively, so we don't say that we're interested in advertising or in content, because in actual fact we're interested in everything that they do. And we can track them back to individual segments and to sales. And this is useful for us in two ways. And the first way is that it helps us understand how we can optimize media. And that's what I'm really interested in talking to you today. Understanding how people actually engage with advertising when they're online. And how the impact of publishers and of the formats that appear on there. And secondly, it helps us optimize creative. And one of the things that I'm going to be talking about today is that it's very important to see the fact of media in context, the fact that the MPUs and leaderboards and DMPUs that we're buying and selling have a context. But the creative also has to be seen in context. And the power of the creative to influence the effectiveness of the media cannot be downplayed. And so I'm going to be talking about both those things in this. So the first thing is, like all these presentations today, I'm going to start with some bad news, and then I'm going to say, don't worry, it's all going to be okay, and I'll come up with some good news and then a solution at the end. But let's start with the bad news, which is one of the most obvious things about advertising in any media is that just because it can be seen doesn't mean that it will be seen. People, when the TV's on and the program comes to an end, people get up and make a cup of tea and they come back and they might not watch the ads. When people go online, they might not be able to see the ads, as we'll see in a second. But even when people are reading newspapers, just because you can see an ad doesn't mean that you necessarily will see an ad. Here we have a couple of ads here in context, and here we have 150 people reading the paper, and what's interesting is that people read the newspaper for the news. Attention to advertising is secondary, and in many ways it's literally secondary. People read the news first, and then they look at the ads. And it's because they engage with the news, and the content is, that they engage with the ads. There is a virtuous circle here that the more you engage with the content, the more you engage with the ads. In no cases have we found do people find the content so interesting that they don't look at the ads. And we have never found a situation where people ignore the content and just look at the ads. It's a virtuous circle here. But it is the reality of attention to advertising in any media has to be understood as well. Attention to advertising is, like I say, secondary. People look at advertising before they read it. And we can see here that for this glorious 25 by 4 here, 100% of people could have seen that. I think this ad is technically, its viewability in digital terms is it's 100% for around about 30 seconds. So it's real sort of premium positioning if you're thinking about it in digital terms. But even though 100% of people could have seen the ad, only 78% of people did see it. And even though they could have read it for 30 seconds, in actual fact, the dwell time with this ad was about 1.7 seconds. And it's about 81% and 2.1 over there. So the attention to advertising tends to be quite fleeting. And this, I think, and it's interesting hearing Peter, so this is why emotional advertising is so much more important than rational advertising. Because people look at stuff. Even people who are in market look at stuff before they read it. When we do studies about in-market respondents, sometimes these engagement times shoot up. Sometimes they're twice as much, which means that you've got 3 seconds of attention. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not effective. You can get a lot of information across in 3 seconds of attention. But more, you can get a lot of feeling across in 3 seconds. But it does mean that engagement with advertising is much shorter than we might think. And this is the same across all the studies that we've done, whether it's out of home or TV or print newspapers or definitely online. Print, as we see, this is going to be about as big a percentage as you ever see. So if you think this is broken, then this is about as good as it ever gets, by the way. Print newspaper, my talk today isn't about print, it's about digital. But I just wanted to say, backing up again what Peter was saying, print advertising is a brilliant way of getting people to engage with your brand messages. The viewability rates are fantastic. The actual size of the ads is disruptive enough to get noticed. People treat print in a slightly different way than they treat digital. They assume largely that beauty makes a difference and that you have to be engaging and those things are sort of embedded in creative culture. So print advertising, we find, is an extremely effective way of getting and holding attention. And we think that largely the digital environment could learn a lot from classic print advertising or indeed out of home. Out of home is a really, really good sort of benchmark as well for the reality of how people engage with advertising. So here is the print news, but what I wanted to talk about a bit more is about digital. Because the bad news is that when it comes to digital, even sort of viewable ads don't always get looked at. In actual fact, from around about 500,000 data points that we have available in total, we've found that only about 20% of what's classed as technically viewable ads actually get looked at online. So and that's using the very lowest definition of viewability, that's 50% of the pixels for 1 second. I know that Group M, like Robin was saying, have a far higher standard for viewability, and we would totally support that I think you should look for far higher viewability standards there. But of the technically viewable inventory, only about 20% of it ever actually gets viewed. And as you can see, 20% of it gets viewed, but probably only about 6% of it gets looked at for more than 1 second. And only about 3% of these ads get looked at for 2 seconds. And we find from the studies that we've done in the past that you really want to get at least 1.5 seconds or 2 seconds of attention to be able to get any form of prompted or let alone spontaneous brand recall. Digital communications can be brilliant at getting people to remember stuff, but you do have to engage with it, even passingly, to get hold of this. So the challenge is, should we just not invest in digital advertising at all? Perhaps we should just all go home and do that. Well, of course, that's not the case at all. Well, you should just be more careful about where you get the digital inventory from, because this is an average, and averages hide as much as they reveal. So what we find is that brands really can outperform the market if they invest in quality inventory. And this is because it's a Newsworks thing, e.g. News brands thing. News brands aren't the only place you can get quality inventory, but they are a very, very good bet to do that. So here's some results from, we did a study for a big utilities company, analysing the top 78 sites that they advertised on, and the propensity of ads to get looked at across a big campaign that they were running. And you can see that there's an enormous difference between the top performing sites and the worst performing sites there. Now, all of these sites here are technically brand safe and put into a quality bucket that you can do. And so therefore the media agencies will be assuming that the price paid should be equal, all things being equal, for all of these things. But what you can see actually is that there is a massive difference in what you're actually getting for what you're paying for across these quality sites. And we think that there's a massive opportunity to take that into account. There's an attention arbitrage opportunity here. You can end up paying much less for the attention that you're getting, the real attention that you're getting, by buying quality press or quality sites, of which news brands are part of that. So what we did is we had a look at just UK news brands, the people who sign up to be members of Newsworks, and compared that to the other. And in the last year, what we can see is that ads of any type, from MPUs up to billboards and so on, ads of any type, viewable ads, are likely to be seen by 24% of people who are available to be seen. And that compares to only 13% on all other sites. Now, there's a lot of dross in that all other sites stuff. But unfortunately, the way in which we invest in media at the moment is that we don't take into account that there is that much dross out there. This equates to an 84% increase in or differential between news brands and all other sites. And I know that there's going to be a press release coming out today saying that there's an 80% advantage. That's Newsworks being modest about it. It's an 84% increase, and that's based on thousands of sites and hundreds of thousands of impressions. So one of the reasons, the next thing to say about it quickly is that ads on news brands seem to get noticed quicker as well. From our modelling of all the data that we've got available, we can see that the longer an ad is viewable, the more likely it is to get viewed, which is stands to reason. But what's interesting about news brands is perhaps because of their superior ad tech, and perhaps simply because they're dealing because of there's more direct buys, or perhaps because they're just the way in which the sites are laid out, people notice ads much quicker. And then the second thing to say is that they also spend more time with the advertising on news brands. So again, you can model all other sites there, and the longer you spend, the ad is available to be seen, there's a slight increase there. But you can equally see that the average dwell time with advertising is much greater with news brand sites than with all the other sites that we connect. So that's one of the reasons why we're so keen on news brands in general. Now, why is this the case? Why is it that news brands would do better than other places? And like I said, one of the reasons is ad tech and load time and things like that, which are big problems in the industry. And the investments that news brands have made might be one of the reasons why they're doing so well. But we think that there might be three other reasons And I just want to quickly take you through that. The first is, there seems to be a problem of ad load in the market. Lots of sites assume that having lots of ads means lots of exposures. Our data suggests that that is not the case. What we have found is that news brand sites who have adopted, because there are differences between news brand sites as well, the news brand sites that have adopted a fewer, better ads approach tend to get an awful lot more attention than the other sites or all other sites that just have tons of inventory dotted around the page. And as you can see here, here's just one person. As ever, people start with the article. That's the interesting thing. Johanna Konta doing so well at Wimbledon. That's the thing that people are interested in. But here we have a large ad format that gets a lot of attention. And it gets attention because it's really the only other thing that you can look on the page. And this is a pattern of behaviour that we see again and again with news brand sites. That it isn't just what you might call the semantic content of the page. It isn't just the fact that it's about Wimbledon and there's an ad about Wimbledon. But it's also just about the layout of the page. Newspapers invest a lot of money in UX and in design. That money is actually very well spent to try and make the reading experience as easy as possible for readers, and then make the advertising as helpfully prominent as possible as well. So one reason is about fewer, better ads. The second is about simple size of ads. We see very big differences between MPUs and DMPUs and billboards and leaderboards and what have you. These differences are not necessarily always represented in the CPMs because they usually have very little impact on, especially for brand advertisers, on click-through rates and conversions. But then again, what does have an impact on click-through rates? I mean, it's a bloody useless measurement, especially for brand advertisers. So what we do find, though, is that they have enormous differences in terms of the attention that your ads are likely to get. Big ads and bigger formats are likely to get much more attention. And then importantly as well, the video seems to make a massive difference. Here's a particularly elegant, simple ad that Chanel has done. And you can see from the ad there's tons and tons of attention on the ad that lasts all the way through. And we have found again and again that video is a tremendously important way of getting and holding attention. But to the question, I don't know who, it was someone over here asked the question before the break about the nature of the video that works. What we've certainly found is that sticking a TV ad in front of a bit of content or blocking a load of content by sticking a TV ad in front of it is a really bad way of getting people to engage with your ads. We certainly think that having not just fewer, better ads, but shorter, more visually compelling ads is the way of building brands online. And again, like I was saying before, learning from print advertising, and especially learning from digital out of home, seems a really, really smart thing to do when it comes to the creative, because people don't have a lot of time with your ads. So you have a choice. You can either try and get people to spend 30 seconds with you. I mean, they don't have to do it, so it's up to you. Or you can try and cut your cloth to suit your time budget, to try and make sure that you can communicate in that crucial 3 to 5 seconds. The final thing to say is that news brands offer a really simple proxy for semantic content. Because you can guess that there is a sports page and it'll have sports news, and there is or there's some branded content and it'll have attention to the relevance to the advertiser there. News brands do provide a really simple way of getting to contextually relevant context. Here's another plug for the Evening Standard here, which we did last week. But what you can see here is we conducted a study to work out the impact of contextual relevance on attention to advertising. And you can see here, here's a Eurotunnel ad, but it's not in context. Here's a Eurotunnel ad that's next to a whole load of branded content. And finally, here's the same branded content, but with a sort of an irrelevant ad for GIFGAF. Now, all the ads have done well versus our norms that we would expect for these different formats. But what's particularly interesting is that ads that are in context get far, far, far more attention than ads that when they do just sort of out of context or against a control that we have there. So what's really interesting is that the context really does make a difference to the level of attention, and it's probably easier to work with news brands than any other organisation to try and get that. We have another little case study here as well about the relevance of content. Early on, when we were starting things up, we did some tests with a different newspaper group to work out how different people look at ads in, either we did some ads for got some ads for Beats and for Samsung, and put half the ads on the culture page and half the ads on the technology page. And again, what we found is that the Beats ads did particularly well on the culture page, against articles about Jay-Z and about musicians in general, whereas the Samsung ads did an awful lot better on the technology ads, on the technology pages. So again, context really does make a difference to the level of attention that the advertising receives, and that can be quite an important factor to take into account. So what I've talked about here is there's a whole load of problems about people not necessarily always looking at things, but that's something that affects all media, and just because people can see stuff doesn't mean they will see it. But news brands seem a pretty good proxy to get that right. So what's the next step? I mean, now that you know this, what can you do? Well, we think that there's probably two things that people can do. One is, we can probably design advertising to suit the environment as much as possible, given the short dwell times we have. This is the thing that we can really focus on. And one little A/B test we've done recently is understanding the emotional impact even of digital advertising. So here we've had two different ads tested on pages amongst highly targeted audiences, people who are sort of in market, and you've spent all this money on the targeting, you might as well just sell them the offer that you've got. And here is the first one. It is working, by the way, it's just that no one's looking. There we are, someone's looked now. There's a lot of text on this ad, and as you can see, overall, it's not necessarily a bad ad, it's just that only 20% of people bothered to look at it, and on average, of those who did look at it, they looked at it for about a third of a second. Doing an A/B test on this with a penguin makes quite a big difference. Never underestimate the power of a fluffy penguin, but also never underestimate the power of creativity. Just because people can see stuff doesn't mean that they will see it. And this is a story for the creative agencies, really, that half-decent creative can double the impact of your media. The media here is bought, is cost the same, but the ad with the penguin in does twice as well as the ad without. That is the creative effect. And so while we are talking about the wonders of the media and stuff, let's not pretend that it's just about shoving stuff in front of people, because the creative makes a massive difference, and that's something that we might be able to help with. The second thing, though, is working out what's good and what's bad, and building that into planning tools, and we have a whole lot of stuff there. But I wanted to announce a partnership that we have with a DSP called ABassess now, that allows you to buy attention or buy media based on attention. And again, we feed them all our data to do it. And there are going to be, I heaven forfend to say, there are going to be some sites that are even better than the Times and the Guardian and the Mail and stuff like that. But within that, you'll be able to see which sites get much more attention than the long tail. And it turns out that news brand sites, like I say, are 80% more likely to get noticed than others. And that's built into the way that ABassess can price advertising for you. So listen, I'm very, very grateful for your time, but hopefully this has provided a bit more insight as to why we're seeing the uplifts that Peter was talking about and the increased ROI that everyone else has been talking about. Thanks very much.